Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Billboard. I'm your co-host, Greg Wise, founder and CCO here at OneScreen.ai. I'm usually joined by my partner in crime, Charlie Riley. Depending on when you're listening to this, he is on spring break with his family. So, Charlie, I hope you are enjoying yourself, relaxing. But I'm very excited about today's episode. We have a very special guest, Melissa Rosenthal, who is co-founder of Outlever, a company transforming brands into the number one news source in their respective industries. Before that, she has served as chief creative officer at ClickUp, CMO at Insight Timer, CRO at Cheddar, VP of creative at BuzzFeed. She has been involved with shaping some of the most recognized and fast-growing brands out there. And you have like the cherry on top, named Forbes 30 under 30, Business Insider's 30 most creative people under 30, and a whole slew of other awards. But together today, we're going to talk a little bit about building brand, what that means to do in the real world, how brand and media are colliding. Melissa has an awesome following on LinkedIn as well. We'll get into that. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for the intro and thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I probably butchered it, but give the folks a little bit background on who you are, what you're up to today.
Yeah. So my background for a long time was in digital media. I was very early at BuzzFeed. I was one of the first 10 employees. I went to then go help start Cheddar News, which is a live streaming media, is a live streaming media news network that we sold to a cable company. And then after that, I moved over to B2B SaaS. So I think I haven't really met too many people with my specific background. I think it's kind of interesting, like kind of going all in on media when it was at the kind of peak, and then just jumping all over to B2B SaaS again, like kind of right when like the software explosion was happening. So yeah, I was chief creative officer at ClickUp for 4 years, ran marketing there. And now I am out on my own doing my own thing, which is kind of I would say just like the culmination of my entire career. A lot of the questions that I asked myself and things that I thought about during my time in media and then also my time in SaaS. And this is kind of a combination of all of those questions and all of those frustrations and the product that I wish I had.
Got it. Love it. And congrats on the new venture.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been tremendous just following your journey as well. Fun fact, when we started OneScreen, within the first couple months, I think you were one of my first cold outreach emails or calls,
Mhm.
and you were really nice to actually answer. We were tiny and it just wasn't the right fit at the time, but you were nice enough to get back to us. And I followed the journey ever since. Obviously, we are in the out-of-home space and you have a lot of experience there, and we'll dive in. So you mentioned you've been at the helm of some major brands. What does brand actually mean to you today, Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a lot of, what I think about brand right now and what I believe brand is, I think it's different stages for different companies, right? I think at the end of the day, brand is the feeling, the perception, the kind of, when you are exposed to that company, like what do you think about them? And I think that's a culmination of the referrals, the reviews, the perception, the messaging, the touch points, the customer service. It's everything, right? It's the experience of that company. And I think early stage, it's really just your reputation. Brand is reputation when you're first starting out. We didn't build a fancy website, we're not throwing a giant conference, we're not doing billboards right now, but it really for us is the experience that both our customers have with us, and then we do large interviews at scale, and it's the interviewees and their experience with us. So it's really like, what is that experience? Is it positive? Are we providing value? What is our reputation and market? Then later on, obviously, as you need to build up your company and build the perception, and brand becomes a much larger facet of that. It's what are you doing in market? What is your perceived value? What are your messaging pillars? What is your what does everything holistically feel like? And obviously there's more investment into different pieces of that. I know billboards are one of the ones that I heavily invested in at ClickUp alongside other, I think, innovative marketing tactics. But yeah, I mean, brand becomes a lot more when you're kind of at the growth stage.
Absolutely. And as far as I'm concerned, and this is the truth, what you did at ClickUp in terms of the out of home investment, I believe was really at the forefront of thinking about out of home as not just an awareness play, but also a performance play.
Yep.
I followed along. I knew a lot of the inventory, followed along just your journey as you talked about it. Tell me about that experience with out of home and just the physical side of brand building.
I mean, I've always been a big believer in out of home. We did it a bit at Cheddar, saw it work. I lived in New York for 13 years, and all I did on the subway was read the out of home ads. Like, I loved them, and I thought they were super creative. And like, out of the million things a day, like those are what captured my attention, like the billboards. And I was just like, this is perfect. Like, you can, as a medium, you're able to place it exactly where your target market is. There's no distraction. In the subway you couldn't use your phone, so you're literally just like kind of sitting there reading everything or thinking. And I was just like, this is just so brilliant. Like, it's the one medium and format that, like, there's no ad fraud, there's no like, hey, where is this actually going, who's actually seeing it, and you can buy the placements based on kind of where people are and what offices are around there, what people's commutes look like, how they go home, where they live. It's just so precise and targeted. So when I came to ClickUp, and we were raising money, I was like, we have to invest in out of home. Like, if we with Atlassian and we want to 10 to $50 billion market cap companies, like there's no other way for us to compete in a market size like that without going really big. And what out of home allowed us to do is it allowed us to be very strategic with the markets that we were buying units in. And it allowed us to be bigger than we were. We were still a very small company. No one had really heard of us. We hadn't invested in brand at all at that stage. Like, that was what was before I came in, and I was like, hey, we're going to go hard on brand here. And one of the very first things we did was we did an awareness study in the markets, the core markets that we were planning on buying inventory in. And we had awareness, like none at all. And said, okay, like the goal was to get this to 5 to 7%, aided and unaided, in all of these markets, and that was the goal. And I was like, okay, so I picked the markets with the highest percentage of knowledge workers. I thought a lot about the units where we could get the most bang for our buck. I heavily negotiated. We did a polling exercise with the entire company where, when I was interested in a city and I narrowed it down to very specific units, I then asked people that lived in those cities what the best units were and why. So, I mean, we were very precise. There's tech, probably more tech now, that allows you to do that. But I think, like, asking humans on, like, hey, where is this within your commute? Like, is this a great unit or not? Like, it was amazing because we had employees in every single one of those cities. So, we were able to really like get the ground, the measurement and the increase in brand awareness to these units. I mean, listen, like, position ourselves directly next to, at the time it was pandemic and Zoom was the biggest company, and Zoom was running a ton of ads, and positioned ourselves directly next to Zoom, directly next to Monday ads, directly next to, all other companies that were multi-billion-dollar market cap companies. And there we were, right next to them. So, if you talk about punching up and positioning yourself directly next to, your inventory directly next to companies that are 50x your size, 100x your size, there's no better way to do it. So yeah, we were very specific about what we bought, how we bought them, the negotiations, the types of units, the buses, high visibility units that were just like outside Fenway Park, and the really big ones. And we kind of spread ourselves against like that. That's sort of what we wanted. We also knew that doing that specifically, like, I mean, Zev is a huge believer in brand, and he, when I first joined, he's like, we're going to do a Super Bowl ad one day. And I laughed, but I wanted to do that too. And this strategy allowed us to be able to buy regional ads within the cities that we had already done brand awareness ads in for the past 3 years. So when that time came to make that decision, it was more like it financially was actually doable for us to buy a non-national ad, and then to also buy ads in the cities where we had just invested millions of dollars over the past 3 years. It made a ton of sense. So we bought the regional ads in the specific cities where we had those ads still running and where we had done brand awareness. So long-winded, but yeah, it was incredibly strategic. We had then also the messaging and the positioning of our units, like bold, legible statements that you may not know what we do, but you're going to look us up. And that was entirely the goal. It was, you're going to go to clickup.com because you have to, after seeing this billboard. And that was it. Obviously, and people hated them and people loved them. And I think that's exactly what you want. You want, if you're going to spend that much money and do that, you want it to be a little bit polarized.
Absolutely. So what you just described is literally how you OOH. When I say to people, How do you successfully do out of home? You literally just described it. To take a quick step back to get to the point, Melissa, and I know that Zeb was a believer in brand. There's a lot of folks that listen to this that we talk to who are trying to pitch and make
Hmm.
that sort of stake their claim that out of home or brand awareness brand is something that the
Yeah.
company should invest in. What's your recommendation to them? What was that journey like internally? Or, you
Yeah.
know,
It was so I mean I told Seb about like my belief in out of home day
yeah,
one and that I wanted to buy billboards, and I mean I think we definitely like kind of agreed on that. Like he was definitely on board. Like I didn't have to sell him on it, but the big win that I had that allowed me to invest more heavily into it was New Year's Eve 2021. And that was the year of the pandemic. And I was
yeah,
like, we should buy the unit directly behind the camera in Times Square. And I'm like, this is amazing because we can create this incredibly bold, bright thing that lives literally directly behind CNN's camera unit. And it's the pandemic. So the rates were insanely low. I think I paid like, oh God, I paid 25K for 50% share of voice on the unit for the entire 5 hour broadcast. Like it
yeah,
was
that seems
stupid.
good. Yeah,
I should not have gotten that rate, but I did, and I negotiated it down to 25K over like 3 months. I like literally this guy probably hated me, and we were behind every single shot throughout the entire New Year's Eve, and it was the biggest broadcast numbers that they had ever seen because people weren't going out because they couldn't be around each other because it was the pandemic. So they were all sitting home with the TV on. Literally the amount of people on Twitter at that time, it was called Twitter,
yep,
talking about us with us in the screenshot of the moments where Anderson Cooper was like drinking and,
yeah.
all the fun stuff with Andy Cohen. It was insane. I mean, and, Zeb was like, holy shit, this is where we need to be. Like, there's nothing that says you've arrived, like putting yourself in the middle of Times Square during the biggest event where every single person is home. So that was the big win that kind of allowed him to say, okay, let's do this. Let's do it strategically. And we started out with a couple of markets with brand awareness. We measured that after several months and then we expanded. So it was definitely like very strategic, and we were able to prove it so cleanly that it worked. Even the anecdotal stuff, our sales teams were coming to us and saying like, yeah, we got this deal because they saw the billboards. We heard it every day. So yeah, I mean, there was no question that they worked and that as we expanded, we saw more success.
Love it. Audience plus context. And that's what a lot of folks don't realize you can leverage with out of home because it is the physical world. It's the audience, it's a context, it's a moment in time. I mean, everything you just described about New Year's Eve. For folks that maybe don't have a leadership team that is fully bought into brand or something like out of
Mm-hmm.
home just yet, but maybe they're feeling the pain in some other advertising or marketing channels, what would be your recommendation to them to help sell that through?
I mean, I would first say like there's a lot of ways to fail at out of home, which is like you buy 5 units in different cities and you're like, why is my billboard not working?
One unit per city, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like that, you can't do that. Like if anyone's like, and people ask me like a lot, I get that question. It's like, hey, we're going to buy a unit in San Francisco, 1 unit in San Francisco. And I'm like, all right, like, I don't think that's the best way to do this. This is like a pretty strategic thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great, like, I think, listen, like, there is also a reason why we did what we did. And the reason why we did what we did is because our TAM is so large and effectively, we're selling into every title level, pretty much across most roles, from engineering to project managers to brand managers. Like we're selling into, it's so vast. Like our ICP is almost everyone from teams of like, five to thousands of people. So when your market is so large and your ICP is pretty much everyone, you kind of have to act like a B2C company a bit because it's a more of a B2C motion than a true B2B motion. That's why we bought as many as we did in as many cities. Now, if it's strictly B2B, like obviously there are specific cities that you can really test in, right? Like test in New York, test in San Francisco, put yourself in Silicon Alley and Silicon Valley and like, try a couple of small areas and see if you can measure that. I would say, you definitely have to do a baseline awareness play, and aided and unaided. It gets a little messy depending upon what you've been doing. But if you haven't been investing in brand, it's pretty easy to see the lift. also adding, this stuff is like so simple, but adding like, how did you hear about us to your, self-reporting attribution when you're booking a demo really helps too. So I would say it's testing, but you have to still buy, like, I would say, a significant amount of inventory. Like, I wouldn't do anything less than 10 in one city to really measure impact. I also like optimized for like more volume. So like I picked a lot of buses because the buses were relatively more inexpensive than some of the larger units where I knew that I was going to get 100 buses flooding a city. And I think it's about like really understanding that, yeah, I mean, you have to be out there. I mean, also
Yeah.
like, again, like messaging is really important too. Like if you're going to put a whole bunch of text on something that no one can read from the 405, like you're not really going to get many people reading that, right? Like, it's not just about buying the unit, it's about, brand strategy too. But yeah, I would say that like we would not have grown the way that we did without it.
Did you just learn all of this on the fly? Was it just a matter of learning as you go? Obviously, some of it's common.
Yeah, I mean, I had some of it's common sense. I learned a lot about it on the fly.
Yeah.
I am good at negotiating. So I like literally was just like, I know you can come down. I like, and I'm not going to say, and I have 12 other vendors like in my inbox, and I know that you can go lower on this. And if you don't, then I'm just going to walk away. And then I talked to Brex, who I was a big fan of their out of home when I lived in New York. It was very prominent. It was perfectly placed, and I knew they were a big investor in it. So I
Yeah.
talked to them pretty early on. I said, what was your thought process? How did you guys do this? Any advice?
Walk me through the you mentioned measurement and you used the word, I think, seamless or clean. What did measuring the efficacy of out of home look like for you guys?
It was really that aided and unaided study
Yeah.
that we did with Momentive AI, which I think they went back to SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey. Basically,
Yeah.
we polled, I think it was like 5,000 people in every market before we ran, and then 3 to 5 months after. I think we did it quarterly to start. Yeah, we did it quarterly. Saw the increases across aided and unaided. And it tracked back to what we were hearing in market and in sales calls. And it tracked back to the social mentions
Yeah.
and people hearing and talking about it. It's like it all like all the sentiment analysis, the social measurement, the impressions tracked back to what we were seeing on the studies. So like obviously there's I would say like skepticism with any sort of like reporting on that stuff, but when you're seeing it track back in market, it works. Our investors are talking about it. Their portco companies are talking to them. Our investors say, "Hey, a bunch of our portco companies saw the ads, they reached out." Like you're just hearing about it so much, and then you're hearing it on gong calls and on sales conversations. It's working. There's no question. And then you get to the point where the small indicators turn into bigger indicators at the report that it's working and the reporting is accurate.
I love it. And you did mention this earlier in the conversation. Sales folks did mention that they closed deals because the prospect
Yeah.
or whoever was
Oh
saw the
yeah.
billboard. Whenever a salesperson maybe says thank you or that, hey, marketing, this worked, you actually probably successfully did something.
Get like direct. I would get DMs on Slack, and it's like literally this huge prospect, this 160K ACV account, just mention that they came from a billboard. I mean, and you have to imagine that there's a ton of that happening where they're not mentioning that as well. They saw the billboard, they looked up that, I feel like attribution is inherently flawed. So there's a lot of it that's not being accurately captured.
When you have sales and marketing working together and you have that alignment, that
Oh
is a
yeah.
very beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Everyone,
it is a beautiful thing. It's usually a special place in time where that's like actually working.
and then you have to hold on to that moment because you never know when that
Yeah,
moment
for
goes
sure.
away. Been on both sides. So, all right, shifting gears a little bit because I want to hear this journey from what we just talked about. And obviously, you love out of home. Sounds like you probably eventually do more of it at the new company that you launched. Tell us about that journey from what we just talked about to launching your own company. It's a big leap.
Yeah, it's exhausting. Everything that everyone says about running your own company is very true. Yeah, so after ClickUp, I had a short stint at Insight Timer, but I realized that like my true calling was to start this company. It was really like everything I'd been thinking about. My co-founder had productized my brain. I couldn't believe like what this thing allowed us to do. And there was no other option for me at this point. I was like, I can't like I can't. Like there's no other, and I think that's the only time you should actually do this, like, honestly, is when there's just no other option. And yeah, we launched, we've been building for a year and we launched last September. We're approaching around 5 million ARR, so we're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of success. Like, I think everything that we were like our hypothesis is like working. And effectively, like, it's definitely a mix of media and like what I learned and what I wanted in digital journalism and what I didn't understand, which is like, why can't companies just own the news and own the things that they actually care about, and own that conversation, that credibility and authority, without having to borrow it and advertise in other publications. And then, a lot of it is like, we at ClickUp, again, like, our TAM was so large that having conversations at enormous scale, being able to talk about timely, relevant things that are happening in the world of our ICPs every day, like, you can't do that. It just doesn't work. You have to pick and choose and be very like strategic with even the ICPs you can go after. So I was like, allow companies to own their own media publications. And then, what was happening, I think there's always like, you can have a really good idea. You could think about something very specific in a specific way, but I think there's always an accelerant that gives you like a headwind, a tailwind rather, when things are happening in the industry that map back to your approach. And what happened for us is media was dying. You know, like, there's not a whole lot of money to be made in journalism. Companies were cutting their news departments, which allowed us to make some really amazing hires, because these people that were journalists for 25 years at some of the top publications don't have jobs all of a sudden. So it really was just kind of right place, right time, right strategy. And the other piece is that there are no new channels. Like, channels are saturated and everyone's struggling and dying to figure out what to do, because it's really fucking hard. Excuse me, it's like hard. And there's not a whole lot of innovation. And before we went to market with this, I talked about 150 CMOs, and I said, what's something new that you're doing? Like, what's a new strategy? Tell me something that I haven't heard. Not one person told me something I hadn't heard. So I was like, this is the right time.
Yeah, honestly, that resonates a lot. I'm a co-founder here, so I understand what that leap looks like. I understand middle of the night, curled up in the fetal position, having sweats and figuring out what the hell the meaning of life is. So kudos to you, first of all, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, founder to founder. It's incredible. Love what you're doing. It makes a ton of
Thanks.
sense. Clearly, you're solving a need. Who are the core? Like, what is your ICP for folks that are out there? Like, are they a good
Yeah.
fit? Describe that.
Yeah, I mean, it's industry agnostic. We pretty much sell into every industry. ICP is usually on the marketing or sales side, kind of depending on how they're finding out about us. But yeah, usually marketing and sales. Sometimes it's both. Kind of like saying, this is a really good like holistic strategy that kind of bridges the gap between kind of the things that we're doing on the marketing side and sales side. So usually Series A and above. Seed is usually just we're a little too expensive. We're pretty premium. So seed, I mean, a Series A to public companies.
Excellent. Got it. And look, this has been an incredible conversation, Melissa. Hearing your thoughts and your story, what you're doing now. Obviously, we're an out of home podcast. So, talking about out of home has been incredible with you. I feel like we could talk for hours about that. How can people and where can people find you? And I will say that with the caveat that everyone should go follow Melissa on LinkedIn. The content she's creating, kind of like building in public, really. It's motivating, it's eye opening, it's great, great content, Melissa. So, how can people find
Thanks.
you?
Well, my LinkedIn is a billboard for
There we go.
me, so that's it. Yeah, I mean, I believe in billboards so much that I created one for myself, and it's my LinkedIn strategy. And then yeah, I think billboards have also just like inspired, out of home has like inspired kind of the way that we think about how we do inbound for ourselves too, as a company. Like, our own motion and our own strategy is actually our own billboard for our company, which was inspired by how we use out of home. And I was like, how can we do that? So yeah, it's definitely like, it was inspirational in the way that we thought about how do we market ourselves.
Love that. Well, listen, Melissa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining the show. And then for folks listening, it's another great episode of Beyond the Billboard. Please look out for more, and we'll see you all out there. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.